welcome to Music 194. One, two, actual, the fourth day of class, but only the second video that we're trying to communicate this way. Let's go over just an opening statement about I tried to do the Blackboard Collaborative because that way we could have class. We'd just be all sitting in front of our computers and talk back and forth. But I've not been able to get everyone on the Blackboard at the same time, and I feel it's necessary that this is the safety net so that you will get the materials or the lectures, which my class is 90% lecture, and give you projects. Now, the downside to this method is I will have to create a new project for each class period so that I know that you did the assignments, tells me that you watched the video, tells me that you get credit for attendance, which is also included in your grade. So therefore, that is why we're doing it this way. I've had trouble communicating with several of you, and I wish you would acknowledge the fact that you're aware now. I've gotten at least one assignment from each student, so I know all of you are interacting in some way, but we need to be more prompt. And the way that's going to be done, I reckon, is through the assignments. Now, each assignment, for instance, there's an assignment. Actually, this is the second video class day. I hope, I'm going to say it anyhow. Each assignment is going to be due prior to the scheduled class day, the next class day. For instance, at the end of this video, there will be an assignment, and it is due before the next scheduled class meeting. Now we've got that covered. We went over in the first class video, and we defined music as sound organized by time. And I imagine probably some of y'all are going, it doesn't make sense, but that's the definition that we're using for this course. And what else did we discuss? Oh, the different types of music, functional, pop, and art music. How can I forget that's what we're studying? And I think I failed to mention that. We're not going to concern ourselves too much with the functional music or the pop music. We're going to focus mainly on art music. Remember the characteristics of art music, and music for music's sake, expression of the composer, and the aesthetic value. I hope the volume or audio on this video is better than the last one. I put my phone in a different position, and from looking at it, I'm probably kind of leaning this way, but the lens is further down, so it looks like I'm looking down at you. That's the reason. I also felt like on the other video, it was hard for you to see the whiteboard. I've tried to adjust that, zoomed it in a little bit. So here we go. There are not just music, but time periods, in every aspect. You might have heard like the Cretaceous period and all that in science class, in geology, biology, all that. Well, the arts and literature all have their time periods too. And here's the ones we're going to discuss. The time period starting at 500, that's 500 AD, after, to use the old cliche or the old saying, after Christ. I am not politically correct. I don't know the correct terminology, but 500 to 1450 is what we call the Middle Ages. And the reason we start with the Middle Ages is because that's the first recorded documentation. Record means to document. It's written down. It's like record keeping. Like when you go to the doctor, they record your visit in your records. But that's our first known documentation and recording about the history of music. You will need to know these time periods. 500 to 1450 is the Middle Ages, and we are going to, after I get through this, we're going to focus on the Middle Ages. 1450 to 1600 is the Renaissance period. 1600 to 1750 is what we call Baroque. 1750 to 1820 is the Classical period. 1820 to 1900 is the Romantic period. 1900 to 1945, now this is according to this textbook, the Roger Kamen Music and Appreciation textbook that I have been assigned to use for this class. I personally disagree, and I know a lot of other music professors and instructors that disagree with this time period. That's only 45 years for the entire 20th century. We just got through with the 20th century. But I think what happened, and we'll get more into depth, toward the end of the Romantic period, around 1900, we started having an explosion of transportation abilities, cross-culture experiences. Remember on the last video I talked about the difference between the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere. Well, now all our composers and music tastes and artists were traveling all around, and it's starting to all blend together. And around 1945, things just exploded. And so that's probably where they came up with that as a cutoff date. And this is what I use for class because it's in the textbook. All right, that's the time periods. And like I said, today we're going to start on the Middle Ages from 500 to 1450. I'm not really going to go into a lot of depth on that right now. I'm going to hit on some aspects of it. But also, there is another video that I'm going to share with you. And on the video, I had a guest speaker a couple quarters ago. This is Reverend Ted Goshorn. I don't even know if that's coming out on the video. I think I looked to see if it would fit. But it's Goshorn, Goshorn, and he is the pastor or the reverend over at the First United Methodist Church here in Eastman. The reason I asked Reverend Goshorn to come in and speak on the Middle Ages is because the church itself is the one main group that established record keeping and having recorded history, especially in music. So I brought Reverend Goshorn in to come in and explain society, as it were, in those days. And you're going to feel like probably sometimes that maybe you're in church, because the church kept the records. The secular world was not organized and did not keep all the records. And so therefore the church just zooms, got all this, documented history and stuff. And they also, as we will get to later in this lesson, they also pretty much ran the world. So with that said and done, let me go ahead, and this video is going to be relatively short because Reverend Goshorn's video is about an hour. So Shall we continue? Turning my back, and then I'm going to try and remember when I turn my back to speak a little louder so that the microphone can pick up. I would like feedback on whether or not you can actually make out what I'm doing on the whiteboard. And if it doesn't work this week, I'm thinking about maybe hunting down a small whiteboard so I can hold it up to the camera. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look for a new dry erase marker. Let's go with, try brown. See if these things dry out so quickly. See, that was brand new out of the box. It doesn't work. There we go. We'll go with blue. I'm going to give you just a general outline about life during the Middle Ages. We all remember about the Roman Empire, how they pretty much ruled the world. Well, this is after the fall of the Roman Empire. And people were just kind of just out there. And like I said, I don't want to take away from the Reverend's video, which I'm going to add to the Moodle page. So I'm trying, if I'm hesitating at words, it's because I'm trying to remember exactly what he said so I don't double it. But long story short, here we go. There were, during these times, 3 main classes of people. Sometimes when I write and try to talk at the same time, I mess up, as we all do. There's 3 main classes of people. Sort of like we have, what is it? How do we break down our system? You know, the people that make all the money, the middle class, and then the lower class. I guess it'd be high, upper class, high, middle, and low. Same thing, sort of, but different. The first class of people is the nobility. Nobility. These were your dukes, your landowners, kings, people who, well, like you see in the movies, basically live in big old castles. They are the nobles. They're the ones that had all the money and pretty much the power. And they sat around, you know, having this big old feast, eating the big old chicken legs and throwing down glog. And they just lived life on the high hog. They would go out and sit and have jousting. You know, they get on the horse and they run and stab each other. Back in throw the man in the pit with the lions, and all the nobility would be sitting up in the audience watching, and this was their entertainment. They would take, they would leave their castles and their land. They'd go on all these rides and go out and pillage and burn down places, and because they were just the thing, at least they thought they were. That's the nobility. They had the money and power pretty much. The second class of people, I'll make sure I use the correct spelling, P-E-A. Peasantry, that's wrong, P-A-S-A. The peasantry, peasants, you know, the lower end people. Now, peasants were the people, they didn't have much at all. They lived in one room, straw huts. They lived on land outside of the big castles and stuff. But they were the ones that went in and did the dirty work for the nobility. They They didn't have indoor plumbing, so they would go in and take care of all the waste in that manner. They're the ones that did all the cooking and all the cleaning. They're the ones that worked out in the fields to grow crops and just do all the dirty work. But yet they were very, very poor. So these were the lower end. But there was another group of people, and I feel like sometimes I need to start from the bottom and put this group on the top, because this is kind of confusing. But this group of people is known as the clergy. See, I told you you're going to feel like you're in church sometimes. The clergy, that's the church. They were organized, all the men in the clergy and everything were monks, and they lived in monasteries. And in fact, Reverend Goshorn's going to go more into that. But you had convents for the women, but they were structured. They had a hierarchy of who's in charge and whatever. They also had education and classes for the young children and stuff. Not the girls. No, women were not allowed to participate in the church or get education, but the guys were. And we're going to get more into that later. The clergy basically ruled the lands, because they would go to the nobility. The clergy now, they were smart. They had religion, and they would go and they'd preach the fire and brimstone on the nobility. Say, look, you need to pay us some of your money and stuff, otherwise you won't be servicing the Lord, and God's going to come down and heat, fire and brimstone just come down on you. And they put the fear of God into the nobles. That's basically it. Who else did they put the fear of God in? The peasants. So the clergy, that's why I think maybe we should go this way. Clergy, nobles, and peasants. And see, visually, and music's written to be visual, by the way. The clergy will put the fear of God. They had education, the smarts, they could read. Nobles couldn't read. Peasants couldn't read. So the clergy, you've heard, the pen is mightier than the sword. In this instance, that's exactly what this is. They had the smarts, knew how to write. They didn't have pens, but they knew how to write. They were basically put the fear of God into these other two groups. What I want you to be able to do on a project in the near future, not for next week, but is compare the relationship between the clergy and the nobles. Tell, basically, like the clergy were smarter and, controlled the nobles, got money from them and stuff because they had the education. And the relationship between the nobles and the clergy were the nobles were subservient to the clergy because they didn't know better. They had to believe in the Word of God, and so therefore they did what the clergy told them to do. Relationship between the nobles and the peasants. The nobles ruled over the peasants and had them do all their dirty work and everything, and they just lived high on the hog. Whereas the peasants did everyone's dirty work, even for the clergy and the nobles. Those are the three main classes of people. Let's see. I'm just reading from my notes now to make sure I didn't forget anything. The peasants, the largest group, because there were more poor people than there were clergy or nobles. The clergy dictated to everyone, nobles and peasants, the practices of religion and the possibility of going to hell. The nobles and peasants were illiterate. Remember, I told you they didn't have the education. And here's something that I like to share, and it's kind of interesting we're going through the same sort of thing right now. You've heard of the Black Death or the bubonic plague. Well, that over Europe and everywhere, the Black Plague just this down in the 400s, remember this is back in those days, just swept the nation, well, the world, the Western Hemisphere, and people were dying left and right and left and right and left and right. They didn't have the medicines we have today, which probably could have stopped a lot of it, but so many people were dying so quickly, they didn't dig a grave and throw one person in it, dig another grave and throw another. In fact, they even stopped digging graves because there were too many people dying. They just drag them all into the center of their area. I want to say in the center, in the middle of town, but they weren't exactly towns, but the center of the hub of where these people lived. And they drag all these bodies out there together and they light them on fire. Burn them. The Black Plague, the bubonic plague. And there's a song, a nursery rhyme that a lot of people feel like came from the bubonic plague. And I'd like to explain that to you. This is really weird doing it, talking to a classroom full of empty chairs, but I'm going to go through it anyhow. The words to the song, ring around the rosies. They'd make a big circle. As they burned them, of course, the people still alive would be standing around this pile of burning flesh. Ring around the rosies. So they made a big circle around the rosies. One of the symptoms of the bubonic plague, they get really bright red cheeks, almost rosy red. So they called them rosies. Ring around the rosies. Pocket full of posies. Well, why posies? Because posies is a flower that has a sweet smell to it. And they would put posies in their pockets so that the sweet smell would cover up the odor of all the dead people. Ring around the rosies, pocket full of posies. What comes next? You set them on fire, they turn to ash. Ashes to ashes. Eventually it's going to get everybody, and then we all fall down. Ring around the rosies, pocket full of posies, ashes to ashes. We all fall down. So that nursery rhyme game, whatever you call it, is often related. I've seen arguments that it came from somewhere else. So that's the end. Each time period we discuss, I'm going to give you a little background about the general life happenings at the time. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to let Reverend Goshorn go ahead. Like I said, I'm going to put his video on the website also, and it will be included in the assignments and quizzes too, so please don't just blow it off. So you'll have this video and the Reverend's video, and then when we get back, let's see, today I'm recording this for Tuesday, so it will be Thursday when we get back. I'll start discussing the musical characteristics of the Middle Ages. Until then, have a good day, stay safe, don't go out unless necessary, and I know you all are young people. A lot of young people don't think this is serious, and trust me, this is very serious. And have fun. Bye-bye.